This is Dr. Amelia Beakey, founder of This Osteopathic Life for the health of all things. As a specialist in neuromusculoskeletal medicine and osteopathic manipulative medicine, I have dedicated my professional career to the study of the intricate design of the human body and understanding how the structural components, nerves, muscles, and bones can influence the function of the entire system. Quality movement directly relates to quality health, and it's important to have the right tools for optimal strength, flexibility, and mobility. Through these videos, I lead you through clear and concise exercises that you can use to find optimal health through movement. It is important to note that while I am a physician, these videos do not constitute medical advice, nor do they replace the important relationship between you and your personal physician. Before beginning any exercise plan, it is important to consult with him or her to ensure these are the right exercises for you, your particular diagnoses, and your current state of health. Thank you for joining me, and let's get started finding best health through movement.
Hello, this is Mary Goldman, a DO in Michigan, and I'd like to share with you how I train lower core. But first, I'd like to share with you a couple of physics secrets that I use to help people in my practice. One of them is the understanding of stretch. Stretch is really a two-directional issue. If you simply move in one direction, you're not stretching. If you simply move in one direction, you're not stretching. If instead you hold one end in place and then you use a force to move out from that place, you are stretching. Or if you're stretching in both directions, opposing in some way, you are stretching. The second principle I'd really like to talk about is that of the stretching of the spine as being important to protecting the spine, because if you're not stretching both the anterior ligaments of the spine and the posterior ligaments of the spine, you're not really going to get a very good result. Let me explain why with this simple dish towel. If I take the spine or the dish towel and I just twist it, it's going to bend at its easiest to bend places. That's the same with the spine. I'll show you in a minute. If on the other hand, I stretch that dish towel and then twist it, I'm going to distribute the forces completely down the spine. Let's look at that with the spine. So if I'm sitting tall, what's going to happen is as I stretch, I'm going to distribute those forces. But if I'm slouching or flattening a curve or bending someplace instead of having smooth curves in my spine, all I'm going to do is turn around the areas that are bent or flattened out of the alignment of the curve, because of course the ligamentous support is not distributing the forces effectively. Now that is my maximum twist when I do that. Even the head and the neck won't go around any further, and it's straining and it's hard on my back, and I'm not doing that anymore. So I'm going to stretch very tall. I'm going to push down with my lower core and stretch my head up to a point just behind the top of the head. So I'm over the foramen magnum where the spine comes up to meet the brain, or the brain stem. So what is going to happen right now is that as I stretch, I have distributed the forces, I have a lot more rotation, and the other thing I have going on for me is that there's no strain or stress. And if I add to that a breath and just let it go with the sigh, I get even more stretch and even less problems. The same is true for forward flexion and backwards flexion. Look at me bend now. And now, when I start using my lower core and stretching tall, a lot more bend. Same thing for back bending. If I stretch up, instead of just trying to bend backwards, if I stretch up, suddenly I can bend a lot further and with a lot more ease. Okay, and of course you guessed it, side bending, not too good without that stretch. So when you side bend, you're always reaching up so that when you go over to your side, you never just collapse. You're reaching way up and you're taking your side bend off towards the ceiling at all times, even though it may be more across the ceiling. So your side bend can actually get extremely stretched if you really reach yourself up. And if you add the breath to it again, look how much easier it even gets from there. Notice I'm not pushing my breath out, and I'm certainly not controlling it out by pursing my lips. All I'm doing is I'm breathing in and sighing. And that's how you get your best motion. It's also very good for changing directions. So if you were to be walking and you suddenly change directions, if you add that breath in there, it smooths the momentum and you'll find it's much easier. The other thing I'd like to talk about today is how to strengthen the lower core. The lower core is tricky because it's not well taught by a lot of trainers. It is not an issue of pulling your seat under you. That just locks you downwards into an improper pelvic tucked position. So what you want to do is sit up on your sit bones. Where are the sit bones? They're located right at the top of the leg, right just above the hamstrings, because the hamstrings are actually going to attach right on the bottom of the sit bone. So that's the flat area before your pelvis starts to curve. That's really far forward for most people. Most people tend to sit in this position. And then they wonder why they have neck and back problems. What I'm asking you instead to do is to sit up very much onto those sit bones. And if you're finding that's difficult, get a prop, get a pillow, get a towel, get a blanket, doesn't matter what you use, put it towards the back of the chair. And now, instead of doing what I'm doing right now, plunk, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to put your feet apart a little bit, maybe even a little bit wider than your hips or at hip width, doesn't matter. Then I'm going to ask you to bounce your back, just like Amelia taught you to do, with your back straightening so that your head is being pulled like a puppy dog with its ears pulling out, and your tail is being pulled so that your seat is going down in that squat towards the chair, and then wherever you are, scooch back a little bit. Feel the back of your chair against the area that you usually sit on when you're curling. And then what you're going to do from there is notice that your weight is on your legs, and that is balancing in a very stable position instead of up on a curve on the back of your pelvis where you're smashing your sacrum down and getting into low back problems because you're not spacing your vertebrae properly. So as we sit here, we don't want our knees to have anything pushing into the back area, because the back of the knees has some very exposed blood vessels and nerves, and that's a good way to damage yourself. So avoid sharp edges on those chairs. If you're stuck in one, you have to sit forward a little bit, get off away from the back of the chair, and then really engage your lower core. So now that I'm here, let me show you how to do this. This is my exercise for strengthening the core. So what I want you to do is put your feet kind of wide apart and turn your knees and your toes in. You don't have to do the toes, but it's a good idea. Then you take a cylinder or your fist and you place it a couple inches below your crotch, and then you start to squeeze very tightly, getting the adductor muscles a good stretch. In the process of doing this, your whole pelvis starts to kind of V down towards your pubic symphysis. And in that process, you may well be able to very easily feel a push in, but a lot of people have to take a fist or a hand and push down into a V behind the pubic bones and kind of tuck in their lower core. When you do that, you have a downward force occurring in your pelvis Against that downward force, now, leaving that down, do the opposition of the rubber band and stretch yourself back up. We're not going to do any of this in the process, please, because leaning backwards is not using the upper core, it's shortening the psoas. We want you with your shoulders at your sides and everything in alignment still. You will notice your behind is behind you. I think that's why it's named a behind. So basically, as you sit very, very tall, you're stretching very tall. Now, it's important to let your shoulders relax to your sides. If you have to work on the computer or something, elbows really should be bent, and the computer top of the screen should be at eye level. And in this way, you avoid a lot of shoulder and back issues. If you're using a laptop, why don't you get a monitor if you're going to be at that station for any period of time and hook it up. And if you notice that you have to bring your shoulders up in order to be able to work, drop that keyboard down on something and work this way. A lot of times I take my screens and I put them up much higher on books, and then I purchase a cordless type of a keyboard and mouse, and I'm able to position them exactly where I want them, and I don't have to strain. Thank you for joining me to talk about posture today and to talk about core muscle strengthening.
Thank you for joining in on this episode of This Osteopathic Life, Best Health Through Movement. This is Dr. Millie Beakey, and we'll see you next time.